Kia ora and welcome to the very first Founders and Friends here at Raygun. I'm delighted that you're joining us today. This is the first Founders and Friends that we're running here at Raygun, and so I'm delighted to be joined by my absolute best friend, Zheng Li. Howdy, Zheng.
Hi, everyone. Hi, JD. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So being the first one, today we're going to be doing a run through of some improved things that you can use in Raygun to make it easier to diagnose bugs, solve problems, get to the root cause of the issue. Everything we do at Raygun is about helping developers ensure that they build great experiences for the users of their software. And so getting more out of Raygun hopefully helps you on achieving that mission. Because this is our first one, we've gone with some ideas of things that we know work really well with our customers from stories that we've heard over the years. But don't worry if we don't dive deep enough on a topic, just pose the question about it and we'll probably run a deeper dive on some of those things in a future episode. So thank you so much for joining. I'm going to hand to Zheng to give her introduction. I think everybody knows I'm the co-founder and CEO at Raygun, but over to you, Zheng.
Absolutely. I'm the VP of product at Raygun, and I love talking to customers. I talk to customers every day, and I love to show you some of the setup things that you might want to think about when you're starting to use Raygun, or you might have been a Raygun customer for a while. So let's get into it. And before we do, actually, I just want to thank our marketing team for doing things behind the scenes to help make sure that this is a great experience for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. They make us look good. We have the easy jobs. So thanks, team. Cool. And we are going to be focused heavily on the product today. So hope lots of demo stuff in here. But we thought we'd just get started with looking at, just getting set up, thinking about application structures. So Zheng, what have you been seeing in the market around that with our customers?
So when people first set up in Raygun, one thing to remember is how you treat your applications. Now, for applications, it helps to segment it based on your own team setup. For example, you might want to set up an app for each team that you have. It could be based on environment or special purpose like the checkout flow. So the app is really an arbitrary container for how you like to do things. By the way, 300 apps is the record holder right now for somebody with the maximum number of apps in Raygun. I do encourage our customers to come and beat this number. It will help to give me a promotion at work. So let's do that. Now, so while I'm at it, one tip is a really simple one is if you do have a lot of applications, let's say you have 300 or more, to make things easier to jump between things, just start the app that you want to keep as your favorite. So those apps will always surface at the top of your application switcher, which is very, very handy.
It's also useful to note there that that's a per user setting. So you don't have to worry that if you make it a favorite, that it makes it a favorite for your whole team. And of course, Raygun has unlimited users on every account. So there's no reason to not invite team members and be able to manage that yourself, how you want to see your favorite apps.
Yes. So let's talk now a little bit about naming convention. Now this is can be a controversial topic. Everybody has different ideas, and we really make it flexible for people on how you want to do it. But here is our suggestion. So as you can see here, we've got a few apps named in the way that we think makes sense, which is starting from sort of that app container, whether it's a website or whatever area you want, and then the programming language, and then the environment. So this makes it really easy for you at a glance what it is that you're looking at and what area that you're looking at. The search function in application actually makes it really easy. So if you wanted to see all production app, you just simply go production. Now all of the apps that mention production will be automatically searched through for you, which is really, really handy.
Yeah, and just a very small minor story. A while ago, I was meeting with a customer here in New Zealand up in Auckland. And one of the things I always like to ask people is what's the smallest annoyance, that we could take away? And somebody said, when I open the app switcher, it doesn't set focus on the search box. So I can't just hit the tilde key, which is the shortcut key to open the app switcher, and then start typing my search. And so really simple little change there. And as soon as we put it in, I was like, how did we not have this before? And that's why it's so important to hear from our customers, because when you are building software, we all become a little bit blind to some of the defaults. And so we love hearing that feedback from everybody.
Yeah.
Cool, Zheng. So you've got your app structures in here now. Now, the next big thing we see with a lot of folks is, especially the larger customers, some of our customers generate more than 1 billion exceptions a month on their single plan. And as you can imagine, that's quite difficult to try and sift through and find the most important things to work on. So what are some of the tips and tricks you've got, Zheng, for helping people get the best out of, like, what should I go and look at versus the noise?
Okay, so first of all, if you have a lot of apps, hopefully more than 300 by this point, what I encourage you to do is, obviously it's important to be granular, but it's also important to have a holistic view of your system. So that's when our dashboard feature comes in. So with dashboards, you can pull in information from across some or all of your applications, and you have unlimited number of dashboards. So you can have a view for each team, each person, whatever you like, and view really good visibility into your entire systems to make sure that you're not missing out on anything. Now, in terms of actually reducing that signal to noise ratio, the first thing I say to our customers is have a look at your error groups and have a think whether these error groups are things you can do something about. For example, a typical example is third-party integrations or a Facebook ads. You might have a Facebook integration. Who doesn't, right? And that might be generating a lot of errors for you, but you can't do anything about because you don't work at Facebook. So what you do is, let's say if this was the offender, you would highlight that and then put it into permanently ignored. So I'm going to do that. Great. It's now in permanently ignored. That means that it's you don't want to hear about it. So if you come into Raygun regularly, now that group will be permanently ignored and out of your main workflow, which is a really good way to tackle those things that you can't change. Another way to do this is through our inbound filters capability. So under crash reporting, there's inbound filters. So this feature allows you to make sure that you can filter things out from Raygun that you don't care about, but you're very specific about the things you don't care about to receive. For example, if it matches IP address, machine name, HTTP versions, tag, and so on. So this is very helpful if you are very, very specific about what it is that you don't want to hear about. Sometimes this might be like you're doing something locally, so localhost is a really good example. You don't want those errors coming in. That's a really good use case for doing that.
I'll give another couple of examples that have also we've seen. And just so everybody's aware, Raygun, we use Raygun to monitor Raygun systems, which is, being a dev, love recursion. And so one of the things that we do is we obviously get third-party pen tests or penetration tests run on our platform every 3 to 6 months as part of our ongoing security work. And obviously, when people run those sorts of tools against live applications, they can generate spurious errors just because they're trying all sorts of weird stuff, even if it's not a security failure. And so we might do things like say, look, block out everything from the IP address that the pen testers are running their tests from. We also have some options in there to ignore activity from known bots. That's a common one. Or, you see something where it appears the user is using IE4 and you're pretty sure that's not a real person, you can block out that user agent, those sorts of things. So it's really useful. As well as, I'll just touch on that permanently ignored. One of the reasons that we built that originally was because of the JavaScript environment. And so there's lots of issues that can occur in the front end of an application that aren't issues that are going to prevent a customer from doing things. So Zheng's example there of like a Facebook like button, and I'm sure we've all had to go in and investigate why the marketing site is running slow, those sorts of things with all those third-party scripts. There are times where you might want to filter things out. An example that is not well known is the extensions that run in your browser, as one example. They actually run within the JavaScript context of the website. So when you open a web page, if an error occurs in a browser extension, it'll actually appear as though it was an error in the page. So things like that we can work with you and also help folks in filtering out that sort of noise. Cool, Zheng.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about, getting a little bit more technical. And by the way, I know we're focusing a fair bit on crash reporting today, but we will touch on some little bits and pieces here and there as well. But yeah, so now that we've got these errors flowing through Zheng, and we've talked a bit about JavaScript, let's go a level deeper. How do we make that really, really useful for us?
Okay, so one way to make it really useful for us is to make sure that you have source maps set up in Raygun. So I've lost count the number of times somebody has come to us and said, we've come to you from another solution because the other solution doesn't support source maps or any sort of simplification. So that's what we're looking at. But JD, let's throw a question back at you. Why is it so important to have sort of source maps or simplification set up? Because I still run into developers that cannot explain that to me.
That's all right. I'm sure a bunch of you already understand it. I'll just take one moment. Somebody has just shared in the chat there that the quality on Zoom appears to be low, but the picture quality on YouTube seems to be great. Seems pretty good here. So as I always say, if software actually worked as it would, we wouldn't have a business. So unsurprised to see there's some issue in there. But we'll also look at that for next time on the Zoom quality. Yeah, so simplification in general. So when we write code, as humans and in our programming language of choice, and then it gets compiled down to run on a computer or run inside a browser, that sort of thing. Now, the most common case we focus on is JavaScript, and that's because we all know about combining scripts, minifying them, trying to make the download sizes smaller, trying to ensure that the website is as responsive as possible. But of course, when you combine a bunch of files and then you collapse them down into a single line, it's very difficult to understand as a developer what the fault is if it just says, error at column, 4 million, line 1, E. You're like, what the heck is that? And so simplification allows us to take a source map file, in the case of JavaScript, and sort of walk it back, take the stack trace and walk it back to the version that the developer was using on their machine. So you can see here in the video, down here we've got some source code that's showing up for the stack trace, and because this is JavaScript, we even pull in the source code fragments around it. But this has happened all automatically with our source map pipeline. It does require a little bit of setup. Zheng, jump into the app settings there and we'll have a quick look. So we have this area, you'll see there's all sorts in here. We're starting with the JavaScript Source Map Center. Source maps are the magic piece that actually allows Raygun and other tools like Chrome DevTools to bring together that code version to the developer version. And you'll see in the sidebar as well, there's a bunch of other acronyms. We love our acronyms in this industry. So like DSIMs, if you've got iOS crash reports or even native desktop apps on a Mac, ProGuard for Android, things like that. So we support a range of these things. JavaScript source maps, though, are the biggest one that our customers are using. And I'll be honest, getting running with source maps, if you're not running it now, can be a little bit challenging. And that's in part because source maps are a de facto standard, where a lot of the different tools that actually generate source maps might do things slightly differently. Now, we've put a lot of investment into the source map backend of Raygun to try and handle all the little weird oddities that might crop up. So while there is a lot in our documentation about getting this set up, and there's guidance here for different configurations depending on how you want to work, please always feel free to always hit that contact Raygun link in the sidebar if you're having issues, because there's every chance our team has seen every weird and wonderful configuration out there. We can help you get going with that. The thing is, if you don't have source maps running with JavaScript and error reporting specifically, I find that the real value drops significantly, because as a developer, I can't actually quickly identify what the fault really was. So really important to get this humming.
Great. Thanks, JD. Another thing I really want to talk about in terms of getting things under control is tags. So tags are a very, very important feature in Raygun. So you can see that tags can be used as a filter, and I'll also demonstrate now how it's used elsewhere. So when you're inside a area group like so, you can use tags to help you structure your data, because tags are structured and indexable data. You can do the filters there. You can also use tags in inbound filters I showed before, and it's used extensively throughout Raygun. So one thing you can do is to use tags to indicate priority or to communicate with your non-development team, like our customer success team. To really use that to communicate whether this is something that dev team need to action or if it's something that our support team can action. So I'll just refer you to one of the case studies that we did with our friends and customer at Open Water. So one thing that they've done, which is really clever, is to use tags in this format. So they had A20, so that means it's a user-generated error, and 20, so the support team can look at that and go, well, what does that mean for us? Is this something we need to action? And it has class 1 and line 2. So that tag passing into Raygun, like so, immediately gives the entire team visibility into, is this something we care about, or is it not something that we care about, or is it something that dev team need to action? So everybody is very clear with just that one single tweak in tags. And priority, for example, you can do P1, P2, P3, P4, etc. So that helps you to indicate how urgent we need to solve that problem, so it's visible to your entire team too.
Yeah, we're also just, I like to share stuff that we might not be doing quite yet, since it's just us and friends. But we are looking at the idea of adding the ability to categorize whole error groups as well, so that you'll be able to do that within the app rather than sending tags and being able to build workflows off those. So keep an eye out for that in the future. One other area that we've seen a lot of customers find value with tags, and I say this again as a developer, I hated working with the code that would integrate with like credit card processing and handling money, because that's always the place where it's like, if I introduce a bug, I'm screwed, right? And so to that end, one of the tips I have is that I would always tag errors that were anywhere in like a checkout flow or a billing page. So it would say checkout on there. That way I can always have a view within Raygun to go and say, show me all the issues that are related to the checkout, because that's just where I get nervous personally as a developer. Yeah, just a little tip there. Cool. I'm also going to throw in another one. I realize I'm usually criticized at Raygun for making meetings run long, but I do have handlers with me today to shut me up soon. But you can also click the top name of the error group. And a lot of people don't know this, but if you click on that, you can actually rename the whole error group, and this will appear differently out on the main error inbox too. And so we see a lot of customers that will sometimes put things like P1 or P2 and things in here, or a note that it's being investigated. And that just can be make it a little bit easier out on that inbox to see that things have been triaged and looked at over there as well. So
yeah, another tip is that you can actually click on the tags within an error group here, and it will go and search your entire app for that tag. So that's just a really quick way to make that easy too.
Yep. Cool. So let's talk a little bit more about workflow then, Zheng. And any tips and tricks you've got around that area for how people should be thinking about working together?
Yep, I sure do. So one of the things that we encourage people is to actually spend a little bit of time each sprint and get into a good habit of coming into Raygun and start paying down some technical debt by solving these errors that Raygun tells you. So what I've talked to customers is it's good to spend about 20 to 25% of your team's time on coming into Raygun and just pick the top occurring error in this case, or you can pick based on number of users affected, which is what we recommend, and just investigate that and just do that per sprint. Just do one per sprint. That means that you're not getting overwhelmed, but you're paying down that technical debt regularly. So that's what I recommend. Just get into a good cadence and put it into the sprint and have a bit of fun with it. You know, everybody comes in and make sure that you investigate that issue altogether. Another tip is that we do have a comments area here. So this is really helpful. If somebody has looked into this issue before and has tried something to solve that problem, put it in. Because if it reoccurs again, then you know that that solution is probably not the way to go. So if it reoccurs, that shows that we should look for another solution. So all of your history is kept in here. So that means that we don't need to make the same mistake or try the same solution many times. So that's one way to make sure that you also get a good flow in here. The other thing I would suggest is to make sure that you have deployment set up with Raygun, because when you have deployment set up, we'll tell you if a deployment has triggered any new errors or if any errors have regressed. So deployments is it's a really big topic though, and we won't get into too much detail today. And I'll recommend one of your other friends, JD, to cover off on the on the deployments area in the future. But deployment is so important to developers, and definitely recommend you do that. So, yeah.
No, that is a huge area. I'm just sweating on the pressure of finding a second friend here, Zing. But no,
What are you talking
the
about? You have many friends.
the deployment tracking is a really popular capability in Raygun, and Zeng leading our product work, she talks about the jobs to be done, so things that development teams are doing. And a common thing we hear from customers is when we do major deployments, there's a team member that will observe Raygun to see any new errors that are coming through, to just make sure that we try to minimize the number of errors that are going to make it to production, but things do slip through. So they jump in and have a look. And that's really what the deployment tracking assists with there, and starts to help you understand what is actually wrong with this version, which ones are regressing things and stuff like that. Super, super helpful all around.
Absolutely. One thing you can do once you have deployment set up is to come into your crash reporting dashboard now and toggle that on. So it's just the cog and then go show deployments. So you can see in this example, somebody's only deployed once. But if you are continuously deploying, you can see that number correlating to your error chart, which is very helpful. Now, the other thing I would recommend setting up as part of deployments is actually to go into our alerting capability. So this is something new that we brought out last year. So to get to it, just simply hit alerting and you'll see a page similar to this. So when you're inside an alert, you can create an alert here. You can say, hey, this is the name I want to see. I can now create a alert across some or all of my applications, which is useful. I only want to know about the new error reoccurs, but you can do other things as well. You can set a threshold, but also now you can either go a particular version. So this is to do with deployment. You want to deploy monitor a certain deployment, or you can go only monitor my latest deployment. So this will be always the latest deployment that you have. So that means that you don't need to come into Raygun and just sit on the deployment page and wait and wait. We actually make this really easy for you to monitor all of the errors and performance issues based on your latest deployments.
And that's super useful, especially for customers that are maybe deploying to mobile apps and things like that, where historic versions can linger for a while and they just become noise because you may have resolved issues in the future. I'll also add the alerting capabilities in Raygun. As Zeng mentioned, we launched this last year. Customers have been loving it. There's a lot of requests that we're getting for additional things that people would like to alert on. Do let us know. There is a lot of active work going on in here. There is also probably, we hope, a week or two. We're currently waiting on Slack just to approve our addition in here that will notify through Slack. So this is going to be the area going forward where we're going to build more and more powerful tools to build workflow and automations on top of the data feed that comes in from your software. And this will also, over time, ensure that it covers not just crash reporting. It does already cover some core metrics out of RUM. So, is our website starting to slow down? Are we doing worse with core web vitals? Things like that can be alerted as well. So there's a lot of activity going on in this area, and will continue going on. So appreciate any feedback that you have in this space as well. Cool, Zeng. What's next?
All right. Very lucky last is integrations, but certainly not the least, I should say. So what are some of our top integrations? Slack, Jira, and GitHub. So I'll just demo very quickly. Now, Slack, most of our customers use Slack, so this is probably just teaching you to suck eggs, as we say in New Zealand, just teaching you something easy, basically. But Slack, you can integrate with Slack very easily on the sidebar. So if you go to the sidebar and press integrations, you have a whole list of integrations for you to look at and integrate with. So let's look at Slack now. So we've got Slack here. All you need to do is authenticate, and then you can choose what you want to hear about, including tags, interactive messages, and that type of thing. Now we have very, very good support for Slack. It's a first-class support. So we do have a two-way sync with Slack. So what happens is that you can have that add mention feature also integrated. So the comments field I showed you earlier inside error group, you can actually use add mention and then the Slack handle for your coworker, let's say. So that will mean that whatever message they've written in the comments area, it will also pop up into Slack, which is a very good way to remind people they need to look at this error and it's not just your responsibility, right? We also have two-way sync. That means you can actually assign a task to yourself or to somebody else straight from Slack, or you can say, hey, let's ignore this error because we're not interested in that. So very good support for Slack. Another one is link to source with GitHub, Bitbucket, and GitLab. So this means that when you come into an error group, if you have link to source integrated, you'll see a little icon for GitHub, Bitbucket, and GitLab, and so forth. And you can actually click through and get to that exact line of code, which is really handy. So here's the image. So you click on that, and that's taking you directly to the line of code, just making things really easier to see what's going on.
I actually particularly love this because, as some of you who've known me a little bit will know, I'm a dev at heart. I've coded for years. Now I'm the CEO of the company. So if I write any code, all I'm doing is creating technical debt for everybody else. So I tend to stay away. But when I'm looking through Raygun and I see, say, a new error or something coming through, the ability to quickly get the context of the source, allows me to quickly get an understanding of, like, does this look like a absolute disaster case for us needing to resolve? Like, how big is this going to be? Or is this like, well, we just need a null check before this thing? So it's a really, really handy way to accelerate the triaging and improve that time to fixing things. And if I may jump right back into the conversation, Zheng mentioned, trying to get one or two of the top issues by customers affected into each sprint. And that's precisely what some of our larger customers do, where I mentioned that they have so many errors that they're trying to get on top of that it's almost paralyzing. And so, but whenever they follow that rule of just top two things each sprint, fix them off, they get on top of things really quickly. They bring down those error volumes quite quickly too. But of course, when you've got a lot of them, that ability to quickly get an understanding of whether, that one at the top is actually going to take 5 sprints of the whole team is really important. And so that's where that code context is really good. That also is deeply integrated into our APM product, which will highlight the source code as well, which we'll have another session on APM specifically coming up. We are coming near the end though, folks. So if you've got any questions you've been holding up, do feel free to throw them in as well. Sorry, Zheng, there was quite a long ramble there from me.
That's all right. I'm used to it. Let's go into the lucky last one. I've saved the best for last, which is Jira. Now, regardless of how you feel about Jira, you can't deny that it's a very, very useful tool. So definitely not bashing on them. So one
We
of the
love
things
Jira.
we love Jira. I'm just joking. We love Jira. So one of the things that's really useful is to actually create an issue with Jira. So as you can see, you can create an issue with GitHub issue. So I've already done that. So all you need to do is click on integrations and then GitHub, and away you go. Now let's do one for Jira. We actually have an awesome two-way sync with Jira. So it's always dangerous when you're doing live demos. So let's go. So you can create a new Jira issue, or you can link it to an existing Jira issue and just put your Jira issue ticket number in there. So let's create a new one. I want to create this for an issue that I care about. So let's do that. Okay, so now I both have a GitHub issue and a Jira issue. So let's go and have a look at the Jira issue now and see what that looks like. Great. Now that's added that link to Jira, so there's no more detail needed. So the developer can just simply follow that link, come back to here and get all of that technical detail. There's no need to double up on like copying all this over, which is great for anybody who cares about efficiency. Now, the two-way sync feature is what I mean is you have status here in Jira. So if you change the status as done in Jira, and fingers crossed it works here. Let's refresh. It also resolves the issue in Raygun, so without doubling up that action as well. So that's another way to make sure that you get the most out of these integrations into your workflow and not doubling up on the work. I think that's all we have to show for today, JD. Is there anything else you have?
I think that's great. We've got a few questions coming through, Zheng, so I'll ask them out loud so everybody can hear them, and we can run through. So the first one comes in saying, do deployments work across crash reporting and real user monitoring? And if so, can you show me how I'd use it?
Sure. I would be delighted to show you how that works. Let's go back into here. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. Great. So obviously deployment works in here. It sure does work in monitoring as well, user monitoring. See right there. Same thing. So top right here and show deployments and right here.
Yeah, and Zheng, are you able to jump through to the docs on getting that set up? So, or maybe I'll talk to it while you're having a look. But basically, yes, deployments work across all 3 products, including APM. They'll show when a deployment has occurred. In the documentation, you'll see that we have some guidance to setting up deployment tracking. Now, the best way to do this is if you've got a CI/CD pipeline, is you can actually just ping an API endpoint from Raygun using any of these. There's like bash examples in there, so even if you don't see one that you're working with, you can sort it out in there, and you can let us know. It's a really simple call, and then that will light up all of the deployment tracking features across all of those products in Raygun. Couple that with the integrations with the source control providers, and that's what will bring in the code alongside each one. So within deployment tracking, you can even see each of the commits that have come through. Now that is just pulling that data from GitLab or GitHub in there, but it is handy to have it in one place. So I hope that helps. If you'd like a hand with getting deployment tracking set up within Rum, though, do feel free to use that contact Raygun link. We're always happy to help. Cool. Second question, DT from Twitter. I have a limited budget to spend on making improvements, building new features. How can I use Raygun to get most out of my limited time? So this is quite common and probably even more so at the moment in the current economic climate, is everybody's looking to build, the new hit feature, the thing that's going to make sure people stay really engaged. And I think, as software developers, we're often on that side of like, well, we know we've got all these things. Like, what if we just made our existing stuff better rather than building new stuff? So it's an ongoing problem for everybody. The way that I tend to think about this is, firstly, if you're not tracking anything, and I take the point about the limited budget, run a free trial. The reason I suggest that is because, particularly with business folks outside of engineering, they'll often not have a full handle on the extent of the issues. So I use this not to make fun of people, but we got a really large customer once on board, and they couldn't understand why they would need more than 25,000 errors, because that seemed like a lot of errors to have in a month. And then they put in Raygun and they discovered that they actually had 4 million errors a day. And we're like, whoa. Now, they were a large company, so that made a lot of sense. So the first thing can sometimes be ensuring that the rest of the organization actually knows the extent of the issues. And you can do that with a free trial on Raygun. We have a 14-day free trial. And so you can do that. The second one is, when I go in and let's say it fits within budget to just have the stream of data there initially, the second thing I'd encourage is to then do a little bit of triaging. What I tend to do when I was doing more coding is, once I know that there's faults in different areas of the code base, if I'm adding features where I'm working in an area and now I've got the context in my mind of how that piece of code is hanging together, it makes an opportune time to sort of slipstream in some improvements as I'm going. So I hope that helps. Obviously, it is a challenge between a rock and a hard place when you've been asked just to focus on the features and not on the quality of them. But that's how I would approach it.
I would say integrate user tracking so that at least you know how many users you're affecting, and everybody, non-developers understand, the number of people affected is really important to make sure that we solve those issues that affect the most amount of customers, because otherwise you're not going to have customers, right? If they're constantly not happy with the performance or the errors.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's critical to how we've built Raygun is, I've always thought, look, why did almost no tools that monitor software actually talk about the user? Like, why do they not talk about who's actually being harmed or impacted by quality? And that's always just seemed really strange to me. So Raygun does track users. That's why we built Rum originally, was to allow you to understand the behavior outside of exceptions. That's why you can set up Rum in like one line of code with Raygun for JS if you've already got it set up in there. But the reason that can be really powerful is if you start talking to the rest of the business about impacted customers and not bugs or technical debt or sort of these fluffier things that are difficult to pin down on the definition. You just say, look, we've got 2,500 customers that we have failed this month. That's a conversation that is going to hit the non-tech people a bit harder than if you're talking about paying down tech debt. It's awesome. We've got a lot of questions here, so we're going to keep jumping on.
Let's keep it up. I think we should jump to the question about
we
issues
got
related
this
to
one on
this.
wait, they come up on the screen. Yeah. So we have a multi-tenant app, some code deployed to multiple URLs. Right now we have a single Raygun app, but we can see every endpoint separately. We would like to see performance metrics I'm going to have to go to the longer one, across tenants as well as per tenant. Is there a way to accomplish this, or some resources we could read? So firstly, absolutely different sort of topologies and tenancy structures and things like that are the sorts of things we spend a fair bit of time with customers on trying to set up and configure, because a lot of stuff is done differently. If you're feeding everything into a single application, which it sounds like you are today, we would typically recommend using the tags for that. So the ability to put a tag on there and say, hey, this allow me to filter on only the things on this tenancy. Within RUM, which is going to be the piece that is going to have the understanding of the different endpoints, and seeing if you don't mind jumping into the URL grouping for a second under wherever it is. But you can configure it that way. However, you're asking about how can I now start to bring this down a level and really start getting granular reporting on each one. Now, this might actually be a situation where it's better to put the different tenants into an app. So that might sound like, oh, that don't really want to do that. But do keep in mind that we don't charge per app, we charge on data. So if it's already in one app, it's not going to be a cost difference to be in the different apps. Now, you might think, well, we've got a lot. So, I don't want to have to go and create a lot of apps, no matter how much Zheng wants me to create more than 300. We do have some APIs coming around this. So if it's the sort of thing that you seriously like to look at, again, and I don't want to triage everything off to contact us, but do shoot us a note and we could have a chat with you about that. And also perhaps make that API available earlier if we did want to spin up a bunch of apps for you. Yep, cool. And we've got another question here. I think maybe the one from LinkedIn. We have customers complaining that the site is broken for them. They even sent screenshots, but the developers say they can't replicate the issue. Can Raygun help me work out what's going on? This is actually precisely why we built Raygun. So a bit of history. My co-founder actually, he hired me into my first job, and one of the first things he taught me to do in building code was to send emails whenever there was a fault in the code. And that was why many years later, when we'd set up a business, we decided to build a fully functional platform for better managing the faults in here. And that goes back to almost the story I mentioned earlier about the customers being surprised they had more than 25,000 errors, is that by default, most people aren't using anything to track this. So putting in Raygun will first give you a quantifiable understanding of the extent of the issues and how many of the customers are affected, but then that stack trace information and extra metadata. And we haven't even dug into things like breadcrumbs that will show user journeys in the lead up to a fault. That's going to give that context to the developer to be able to recreate the issue, hopefully much more easily than if they aren't getting that level of detail. I always reflect back, and I don't know that if it still happens this way, but before I started building businesses, I was a developer building stuff for different companies, and nothing would make my heart sink more than when I would get a Word document with a screenshot of the 500 error page and be like, it's broken, fix it. And you're like, what can I do with this? But obviously they're actually trying to help. So they're the best customer because most people won't even try to help. But yes, Raygun will capture all of that for you.
Jody, if I may jump in, we do have
Sure.
an article that talk exactly about this in our blog area. So grab that URL and have a look. But I'll just demo that very quickly to see what we mean. So when you come into an error group, you see something like this. If you have breadcrumbs integrated, so breadcrumbs gives a developer blow by blow action of what happened to that user leading up to a problem happening, an error happening. So you can see this user had a lot of UI clicks and had a lot of things going on, very active on our website in this case. So a developer can just use this and replicate exactly what they were doing. So they can no longer say, hey, I don't know what they were doing. I can't replicate this problem. And also sessions help as well if you have real user monitoring. By the way, this is a demo app, even though the people's name and all that looks real, it's not real. So you can actually look at headers and actually look at all the other pages they've viewed beforehand as well. So another way to really do this is actually to come into, let's say it's a crash, right? You come into crash reporting, you know what their email address is because you use user tracking. Sorry, just one moment. Let's copy their email address here.
Zheng is being forced to use a Windows PC here and is a Mac user. So
Sacrilege. So if I just grab their email address, because I know what the email address is, I just put into crash reporting, and bam, I can see all the errors that they've experienced. Just give that link to the developer, and they should have no problem replicating that problem.
we actually do this a lot at Raygun as well, where, if you do contact us and there was an issue, Raygun, despite the fact we are a crash reporting company, all software has some faults and bugs. That's something our support team will do, is go and have a look and say, hey, actually, here's all the context to pass through to the engineering team, which is super helpful. We got one last question from Zoom. After I've set up alerts, who will receive them?
Good question. Sorry, we didn't demo that earlier. That was my mistake. So two things. If you're sending it to webhooks, obviously you don't need to configure who receives them. But if it's an email, which is our default, here you can choose. So here's all your team members, and let's say it's me, and then save changes. So that will only come to me. I think I've chosen something wrong. So that will be once the recipients, you can choose many as well, is set, that will be there, they will receive that. If, say, you have lots of alerts set up and you want to be subscribed to an alert that you are not currently subscribed to, all you need to do is click on an alert and just go subscribe. And now you're subscribed to it as well. Within alerting, we have this helpful toggle, so you can see only the alerts that you have been subscribed to.
Yeah, we are doing as well, because we don't do a lot of these sorts of videos, so I like to be pretty open about some of the things we're exploring. We have a few customers asking to effectively be able to just punch in any email address here rather than just to teammates. And we have a large international pizza chain that is using this sort of feature to explore the idea that if somebody was trying to order a pizza and it failed, using the system to notify the individual store that there was an issue, so that they can actually contact the customer and say, hey, we know you couldn't order that pizza, do you want us to still make it for you? Which is an incredible customer experience story. At the moment, however, it is being focused on teammates that you can mention here. Again, Raygun doesn't charge on the number of users, so you can add a heap in there, won't cost you a penny. The only reason we haven't opened that up more broadly is effectively just trying to avoid abuse at this point. You will be surprised, or maybe not, at just how many different things, spammers and whatnot try and take advantage of. And so we're looking at that as a possibility to really open up that alerting further. So if that's something that would be of interest to you, do let us know. These are all things that we're working on. Awesome.
Yeah.
See?
By the way, if you do want to invite more team members into your team, simply go into an app, click on invite team, and you can invite them either as an owner, which means they see all of the details, or as a user, which means they can only have access to the applications that you've invited them to. Yep. So I think that's all we have time for today.
Yeah, that's everything. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is our inaugural one, so I appreciate you helping us beta test this. We will be back next month on the 7th of September with my good friend Arisha out of our CS team. Arisha's awesome, very, very bubbly person, so it really will be a great session, that one. Do appreciate any other feedback as well on things we could improve with this. Thank you so much for joining. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you.